You know, when we think about the discovery of penicillin, we usually picture one guy, one lab, and one super lucky accident. But that's just not the whole story, not even close. The famous discovery was really just page one of a much longer, way more complex, and honestly, a much more fascinating journey.
And here he is, the man at the center of the myth, Sir Alexander Fleming. In the history of science, his name is basically synonymous with the world's first true antibiotic, and for good reason. But he's not the only hero in this story.
The story you probably heard in school is pretty simple, right? A brilliant but kind of messy scientist forgets about a petri dish, a random mold spore floats in through the window, and boom, a medical revolution is born. It's a fantastic story, but it's only the beginning.
So what if that eureka moment wasn't the end, but just the start? What if the real story involves a lost decade, a forgotten team of scientists, and a desperate race against time during World War II? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into. All right, so let's start with a legend does with that famous accident, because this part of the story is absolutely true and it is pretty amazing.
I mean, listen to Fleming himself. When I woke up just after dawn on September 28th, 1928, I certainly didn't plan to revolutionize all medicine. He'd just gotten back from vacation and was just cleaning up his lab, sorting through old experiments, not expecting to make history.
Okay, so check this out. This is a photo of what he actually saw. You can see this blob of bluish-green mold that had contaminated a dish of Staphylococcus bacteria. But look closely. Right around the mold, there's a clear ring where the bacteria are just gone. That mold, which turned out to be a rare strain of Penicillium notatum, was releasing something that was absolutely destroying the bacteria.
And what Fleming had stumbled upon was the world's first true antibiotic. He named the substance penicillin. It's basically a weapon that microorganisms use to fight each other. And for the first time, we were about to harness that power for ourselves.
Now here's the part the popular story always leaves out. You'd think this discovery would change the world overnight, right? Wrong. In reality, this is where the story grinds to a halt for 10 years.
So here's the problem. Fleming was a great bacteriologist, but he couldn't actually isolate the active ingredient in the mold juice. It was incredibly hard to produce and seemed really unstable. He basically concluded it would probably never be a useful drug. And so, for a whole decade, penicillin was just a laboratory curiosity.
But thankfully, the story didn't end there. In 1939, a new team at Oxford University dusted off Fleming's old research. And this is where that lab curiosity finally starts to look like a cure.
See, the real story of penicillin is all about collaboration. It wasn't one lone genius, it was this incredible team. You had Howard Florey, the leader who put the whole project together. Ernst Chain, a brilliant biochemist who found Fleming's paper and figured out how to purify the stuff. And then you had Norman Heatley, the unsung hero who figured out how to actually make enough of it to test.
And when I say they figured it out, I mean they got creative. We're not talking about some high-tech lab here. They literally turned their entire space into a makeshift penicillin factory, growing the mold in anything they could get their hands on. Hospital bedpans, bathtubs, old milk churns, whatever worked.
Then in May of 1940 came the moment of truth. They took 8 mice and gave them all a lethal dose of bacteria. 4 of the mice were left alone. The other 4 got a shot of their purified penicillin. By the next morning, the untreated mice were all dead. The 4 that got penicillin, they were perfectly fine. This line from Heatley's diary is just classic scientific understatement. It really looks as if penicillin may be of practical importance. Yeah, you could say that.
So the Oxford team proved it worked. But they had a huge problem. They couldn't make nearly enough of it. And with Britain getting hammered in World War II, they desperately needed help. So they flew to the United States, setting the stage for one of the biggest scientific scale-ups in history.
And this image just says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the bedpans and bottles in the Oxford lab, and on the other, you have these massive industrial deep tank fermenters in an American factory. This was the leap needed to get penicillin to the world. And a huge amount of that work happened in, of all places, a government lab in Peoria, Illinois. The researchers there made 3 game-changing discoveries. First, they tried adding corn steep liquor, a byproduct of processing corn, and it boosted the penicillin yield by 500 times. Insane! Second, they perfected growing it in those giant deep tanks. And third, after searching the globe, a lab assistant found a super productive new strain of mold on a cantaloupe from a local grocery store.
So what was the result of all this incredible teamwork and innovation? Get this.
Thanks to a massive effort between the US government and several drug companies, they produced 2.3 million doses of penicillin in time for the D-Day invasion of Normandy in 1944. It saved an unbelievable number of lives.
And as production went into overdrive, the price just plummeted. A dose that cost $20 in 1943, which was a lot of money back then, cost just 55 cents 3 years later. The wonder drug was finally available to pretty much everyone.
So what was the ultimate impact of this incredible decade-and-a-half-long journey? Well, it was nothing less than a complete revolution in medicine and human health.
You saw its effect on the battlefield immediately. For the first time in history, doctors could reliably treat infected wounds. Before penicillin, you were more likely to die from an infection than from the actual injury itself. This changed everything.
And that's why today, the official historical record sets things straight. This plaque gives credit where it's due. To Fleming for the initial discovery, absolutely, but also to Florey and Chain's team at Oxford for proving it could be a drug, and to the American scientists and engineers who made it available to the world.
And penicillin's legacy is so much bigger than just one drug. Its success kicked off the entire antibiotic era. Think about it. So much of modern medicine, from complex surgeries to chemotherapy to organ transplants, is only possible because we can control the risk of bacterial infection.
So you see, the story of penicillin isn't just about one lucky accident. It's a story about observation, sure, but it's also about persistence, teamwork, and massive-scale innovation. It took a global village to turn a bit of mold into a miracle. And as we now face the growing crisis of antibiotic resistance, it leaves us with a really important question. Where will our next breakthrough come from?